She only had $30 for her twin's birthday. The billionaire CEO silently watching at the next table was the man who abandoned her, but was too shocked to talk. "Don't you dare come near them." Lauren Carter's voice cut through the diner like a blade, low and lethal. Her body formed a wall between the twins and the man now standing 3 feet away, his face drained of color, his mouth opening and closing like he'd forgotten how to form words. Trevor Brooks, billionaire, CEO, the man whose face graced Forbes covers, stood frozen in a roadside Denver diner with his hands raised like a criminal caught mid-crime, because that's exactly what he was. 6-year-old Lily looked up at her mother, confusion clouding her small face. "Mummy, why are you shaking?" Noah pressed against his sister, his hazel eyes, Trevor's eyes, wide with fear he didn't understand. And at that exact moment, as the tension coiled so tight the air itself felt combustible, Carlos stepped between them, his hand moving to his phone, his voice dropping into something protective and dangerous. "Lauren, say the word and I'm calling the cops, right now." Trevor's throat worked, his hand trembled as he lowered it slowly. "Please, I just need 5 minutes. 5 minutes to explain." "Explain?" Lauren's laugh was broken glass. "You want to explain? Here? Now? In front of them?" Her eyes were wild, furious. But underneath the rage, something else flickered, something that looked like the same fear Trevor felt clawing up his spine. Because 30 seconds ago, their eyes had met across this diner. And in that instant, 6 years of carefully constructed lies, 6 years of survival and silence, 6 years of pretending the past was dead and buried, all of it shattered. Trevor had seen his children for the first time, and Lauren had seen the ghost she'd spent 6 years running from materialize in the one place she thought was safe. "Mummy?" Lily's voice cracked. "Who is that man?" The question hung in the air like a guillotine. Trevor's heart stopped, his lips parted. The truth, the answer that would change everything, sat on his tongue, burning to come out. But before he could speak, before Lauren could deflect, before the moment could shatter any further, Noah tilted his head, studying Trevor's face with the brutal honesty only children possess. "He looks like me," the boy whispered, and the entire diner went silent. Meanwhile, 15 minutes earlier, the cheap balloons swayed above the wobbly table, their helium already dying, blue and pink mylar reflecting fluorescent lights, pretending at celebration while everything underneath was falling apart. Lauren's hands trembled beneath the table as she stared at her phone screen. $8. That's what remained until Friday. $8 between now and 3 days of meals, gas money, the electric bill sitting unopened in her purse because she couldn't bear to see the red letters screaming, "Final notice." She forced her face into something that resembled happiness as she watched Lily and Noah lean over the single cupcake she'd split down the middle. 6 candles. 3 jammed into each half, because $30 at a roadside diner could buy exactly this. 2 cupcakes, 1 pack of candles, and a handful of fries going cold on a shared plate. "Make a wish, babies," she whispered, her voice threatening to break. Lily squeezed her eyes shut, hands clasped like prayer. Noah copied her, his face scrunched in that serious concentration that made Lauren's chest ache. What could they possibly wish for that she had the power to give? The bill sat face down near the edge of the table. $22. She'd done the math 3 times. That left her $14 in the red until payday. Her thumb hovered over her banking app, refreshing it like maybe the universe would take pity, like maybe some miracle would appear in her account. But nothing changed. The red numbers glared back, merciless and cold. But what Lauren didn't know, what her racing heart and white-knuckled grip on that phone couldn't possibly comprehend, was that 15 feet away, hidden behind a tall menu and sunglasses he had no reason to wear indoors, sat the man who destroyed her. Trevor Brooks hadn't moved in 6 minutes. His water glass sat untouched, condensation pooling on the table. His expensive watch, worth more than Lauren's yearly rent, ticked away seconds that felt like hours. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what he was seeing. Through the gap between the menu and a laminated dessert card, He stared at two small faces blowing out candles on a gas station cupcake. The girl had his mother's nose, delicate, sharp, unmistakable. The boy had Trevor's eyes, that exact shade of hazel that shifted between green and gold depending on the light. 6 years old. The math landed like a fist to his gut. Those were his children. His hands started shaking. The menu trembled. His vision narrowed until all he could see were those two small faces, laughing, celebrating a birthday in a diner that smelled like grease and desperation. He'd spent 6 years convincing himself Lauren had moved on, that she'd found someone better. That leaving had been the right choice, the noble choice, the choice that protected her from the scandal threatening to destroy him. He'd built an empire in those 6 years, doubled his wealth, graced magazine covers, dated models and heiresses who looked perfect on his arm but felt like cardboard in his bed. But every night, in the dark, when the penthouse was too quiet and his success felt too hollow, he thought about her, about the woman he'd loved so completely it terrified him, about the choice he made in fear, about the check he'd left $50,000 like that could buy forgiveness, and the note that said, "I'm sorry," as if 2 words could cover the weight of abandonment. Now, watching Lauren's phone buzz, watching her face go pale as she answered in a whisper, "Yes, I'll have the rent, please. Just give me until Wednesday." Trevor felt something crack inside his chest. He'd done this. Whatever pit she was drowning in, he'd shoved her into it and walked away. His fingers gripped the edge of the table. He had to move, had to stand, had to cross that impossible distance and fall to his knees and beg for a forgiveness he knew he didn't deserve. But terror rooted him in place. What if she screamed? What if she told him to disappear again? What if those children, his children, looked at him with nothing but confusion or worse, with nothing at all? Just as Trevor finally forced himself to move, to push the menu aside and stand, the diner door chimed. A man walked in. Work boots, faded jeans, flannel shirt rolled to the elbows. He carried a small wrapped gift covered in cartoon rockets. "There's my favorite space explorers," the man called out, his voice warm and familiar. The twins exploded from their seats. "Carlos!" They crashed into him like he was their whole world. Trevor's heart stopped. Lauren's face transformed relief, flooding her features like she'd been drowning and someone just threw her a lifeline. Carlos ruffled Noah's hair, handed the gift to Lily, pulled Lauren into a brief hug that looked easy, practiced, intimate. "Your mum told me rockets were the theme this year," Carlos said, grinning. "We love rockets." Noah bounced, his small hands clutching Carlos's sleeve. And Trevor, billionaire, CEO, man who commanded boardrooms and closed billion-dollar deals, felt his entire world collapse. Another man was raising his children. Another man made Lauren smile like that. Another man got to show up with gifts and ruffle their hair and be their hero while Trevor sat 15 feet away, invisible and irrelevant. The water glass cracked in his grip, a thin fracture spiderwebbing down the side, ice water seeping across his palm. He didn't feel it. All he felt was the suffocating realization that he'd gambled everything on fear and lost. But then, as Carlos started telling the twins about a telescope he'd found, Lauren's gaze drifted. Casual at first, just a glance across the diner, and then her eyes landed on Trevor. The world stopped spinning. Her face went white. Her mouth opened. Her hand shot out, instinctively pulling Lily and Noah against her sides. Their eyes locked across 15 feet of scuffed linoleum and dying neon light. 6 years of silence. 6 years of separate lives. 6 years of regret and rage and unspoken truths. All of it colliding in a single, devastating moment. Carlos noticed immediately. "Hey, you good?" But Lauren couldn't answer, couldn't breathe, couldn't tear her gaze away from the ghost now rising from the booth, his face stricken, his eyes wide with something that looked like desperation. Trevor stood. His legs felt unsteady. His carefully rehearsed apologies, 6 years' worth, turned to ash in his throat. This was it. The moment he'd imagined 1,000 times in 1,000 different ways. But none of those fantasies prepared him for the look on her face. Not anger, not even hatred, terror. She looked at him like he was a bomb about to detonate. "Mommy?" Lily tugged her sleeve. "Who's that man? Why is he staring at us?" Noah looked between them, his small brow furrowed. Carlos stepped in front of Lauren, his posture shifting into something protective, guarded. And Trevor understood, in that horrible, clarifying instant, that he wasn't their father. He was the man who ran. He was the threat. He was the stranger who didn't belong in this carefully constructed world Lauren had built from the ashes he'd left behind. His throat closed. His hands shook. Every step toward them felt like walking through concrete. But he couldn't stop. 6 years of regret propelled him forward. "Lauren," he managed, his voice cracking on her name. And that's when she said it. That's when her voice cut through the diner, low and lethal and trembling with fury. "Don't you dare come near them." And in that moment, he understood one devastating truth. The hardest battle of his life wasn't building an empire. It was winning back the family he'd thrown away. And he had no idea if Lauren would ever let him close enough to try. But how did two people who once loved each other so completely end up here, standing on opposite sides of a diner, with 6 years of silence and 2 children between them? What choice did Trevor make that turned him from the man Lauren trusted with her whole heart into the ghost she's spent 6 years running from? And what really happened the night he left her with nothing but a check and 2 words that could never be enough? Well, quickly hit that subscribe button and tell us what time and country you're watching from. It makes me know it's real people, real family members, watching my stories, and I feel closer to you as a family while narrating these stories. Comment present if you're here with us today, and please, please don't leave our story in the middle. It hurts our family's growth when you do so. Now, get comfortable and let me take you back to how Lauren Carter's story began on that rainy Thursday morning, 6 years before the diner. The rain came down in sheets, turning Manhattan into a blur of gray and neon. Lauren Carter stood under the awning of Brooks Tower, water dripping from her hair onto the portfolio clutched against her chest like a shield. This was it. Her first real design job in New York City, junior designer for a penthouse lobby renovation. It wasn't much, barely enough to cover her shoebox apartment in Queens, but it was a start. She'd left Denver 3 months ago with nothing but a used Honda, 2 suitcases, and dreams too big for her small-town life. Her mother had worked herself into an early grave cleaning other people's houses. Lauren had sworn she'd never live like that, exhausted, invisible, forgotten. Art was supposed to be her escape. Design was supposed to be her freedom. But right now, standing in a downpour with makeup running down her face and her cheap blazer soaked through, freedom felt more like drowning. She checked her phone. 9:47 a.m. 13 minutes until the client meeting. Deep breath. You've got this. Lauren pushed through the revolving doors into the lobby, her wet shoes squeaking against marble floors that probably cost more than her yearly rent. And that's when she saw him. A man stood directly in front of the elevators, phone pressed to his ear, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Cancel the meeting. I don't care what excuse they gave. If they can't deliver results by Monday, they're out." He didn't even glance up. "Tell Patterson I want the Seattle contracts on my desk by noon, or he can clean out his office." Lauren's irritation flared. She was already late, already soaked, already feeling like an imposter in a building where the doormen probably earned more than she did. And this man with his perfectly tailored suit and his arrogant posture was blocking the only way up. She cleared her throat. "Excuse me." "Nothing." He kept talking, his back still to her. "Excuse me," she repeated, louder this time. He turned slightly, annoyance flashing across his face. Held up one finger in a wait gesture that made her blood boil. Lauren's patience snapped. "You're standing in the only doorway," she said, her voice sharp. "So unless you want me to redecorate this lobby from the street, move." The man stopped mid-sentence. Slowly, he turned to face her fully, and Lauren's stomach dropped. He was younger than she expected, maybe early 30s. Dark hair, sharp jawline, eyes that looked like they could calculate your net worth in seconds. The kind of handsome that came with power and money and the absolute certainty that the world bent to accommodate him. "And who exactly are you?" he asked. his tone somewhere between amused and irritated. "Someone trying to do her job." Lauren lifted her chin, refusing to be intimidated. "Now, are you going to move, or do I need to design around you?" For a moment, he just stared at her. Then something shifted in his expression, surprise, maybe, or curiosity. "Trevor Brooks," he said, extending his hand. "I own the building." Of course he did. Lauren's face flushed, but she refused to back down. She shook his hand firm, brief, and met his eyes. "Lauren Carter, I'm here to make your lobby not look like a corporate mausoleum, still blocking my way." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, barely there, but real. He stepped aside. "Good luck with that," he said as she passed. "The last 3 designers quit." Lauren stopped, turned. Then they weren't very good designers, and she walked into the elevator without looking back, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack through her ribs. She told herself it was a one-time encounter, a forgettable clash with an entitled CEO who probably wouldn't remember her name after 5 minutes. But 3 days later, she was back at Brooks Tower, finalizing material samples in the lobby, when Trevor walked past. He paused. "Still here?" "Still working," Lauren replied without looking up from her fabric swatches. "The corporate mausoleum coming along?" he asked. She glanced at him, caught the faint amusement in his eyes. "Slowly but surely. Turns out death and resurrections take time." He laughed. Actually laughed. Not the polite, controlled sound she'd expect from a man like him, but something genuine. "Coffee?" he asked suddenly. Lauren blinked. "What?" "There's a place around the corner. Good coffee, terrible pastries. You look like you could use both." She should have said no. Should have remembered that men like Trevor Brooks didn't offer coffee out of kindness, they offered it because they wanted something. But she was exhausted, and curious, and maybe, just maybe, tired of saying no to everything that scared her. "1 coffee," she said, "but I'm buying my own." Deal. 1 coffee turned into 2. 2 turned into lunch the following week when Lauren was back at the building, adjusting lighting fixtures. Lunch turned into dinner a month later, after another accidental run-in at a building Trevor's company was acquiring in Midtown. "You know," Lauren said over pad thai at a tiny restaurant in Hell's Kitchen. "For someone who owns half of Manhattan, you sure spend a lot of time in buildings where I happen to be working." Trevor's smile was almost sheepish. "Coincidence?" "Right. And I'm the Queen of England." He set down his fork, his expression shifting into something more serious. "Okay, full disclosure. I asked your firm where you'd be working this month." Lauren's eyebrows shot up. "That's borderline stalking. That's called strategic planning. That's called creepy." "Fair." He leaned back, studying her. "But if I'd just asked you to dinner like a normal person, would you have said yes?" Lauren considered. "Probably not." "Exactly." She laughed despite herself. "You're insufferable. I've been called worse." But beneath the banter, something real was building. Lauren could feel it in the way Trevor listened when she talked about her designs, like her ideas actually mattered. In the way he asked about her mother, about Denver, about the dreams she'd carried across the country in a beat-up Honda. He wasn't what she expected. Yes, he was wealthy. Yes, he commanded rooms with a single glance. Yes, he lived in a world so far removed from hers it might as well be another planet. But he was also lonely. She saw it in the way his smile never quite reached his eyes when he talked about his family, in the tension that crept into his shoulders whenever his phone rang with his father's name on the screen. Trevor Brooks had everything, and somehow it still wasn't enough. 3 months after their first coffee, Trevor invited Lauren to his penthouse. "Just to see the view," he'd said. "Best in the city." She knew it was more than that. Knew crossing that threshold meant something neither of them had said out loud yet. But she went anyway. The penthouse was everything she expected, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, furniture that cost more than her college tuition, art on the walls that belonged in museums. But Trevor led her straight to the windows, bypassing all the expensive trappings, and just stood there with her, watching the city lights flicker like stars. "My father built this company from nothing," Trevor said quietly. Worked 80-hour weeks, missed every birthday, every holiday. By the time I was old enough to understand what success looked like, he'd already decided I would carry it forward. "Did you want to?" Lauren asked. Trevor was silent for a long moment. "I don't know if I ever had a choice." Lauren turned to face him. "There's always a choice, is there?" His eyes met hers, and she saw the weight he carried, the expectations, the pressure, the life mapped out before he could even decide if he wanted it. "Because from where I'm standing, it feels like everything's already been decided." "Then undecide it," Lauren said softly. "You're not your father. You're not this company. You're just you. And that should be enough." Trevor stared at her like she'd just spoken a language he'd forgotten existed. And then, after a moment of silence, looking at themselves, he kissed her. It wasn't careful or calculated. It was desperate, like a man drowning who'd just found air. Lauren kissed him back, her hands fisting in his shirt, her heart slamming against her ribs. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Trevor rested his forehead against hers. "Promise me something," Lauren whispered. "Anything. Promise me you'll never become one of those men who only sees dollar signs, who measures everything by profit and loss. Promise me you'll stay human." Trevor's hands cupped her face, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. "With you, I see everything differently, I promise." The city stretched out behind them, a million lights flickering in the darkness. For a moment, everything felt possible. Not until 6 months later, when the newspaper headlines screamed from every newsstand in Manhattan, "Brooks Enterprises faces federal investigation. CEO's father accused of embezzlement." Trevor sat in his office, the paper crumpled in his fist, his world collapsing around him. His phone buzzed. Lauren's name lit up the screen. He stared at it, his thumb hovering over the answer button. And for the first time since he'd met her, Trevor Brooks made a choice based entirely on fear. He let it ring. That first week after the headline broke, Trevor stopped sleeping. His father, the man who'd built Brooks Enterprises from the ground up, who'd preached integrity at every board meeting, who'd made Trevor memorize company values before he could ride a bike, had been stealing from his own investors for over a decade, $53 million, funneled through offshore accounts, hidden in shell companies, disguised as legitimate expenses. And now, the federal government wanted answers, the board wanted blood, the media wanted a villain. Trevor sat in emergency meeting after emergency meeting, lawyers flanking him like bodyguards, their words blending into a suffocating hum of legal jargon and worst-case scenarios. "If we don't cooperate fully, the entire company goes under. Your father's facing 20 years minimum. Every transaction from the last 15 years is under review. The stockholders are already filing lawsuits." Trevor's phone buzzed continuously, investors demanding explanations, business partners severing ties, reporters camping outside his building, shouting questions every time he left. And through it all, Lauren kept calling. He stared at her name lighting up his screen once, twice, 7 times in a single afternoon, and every time his thumb hovered over the answer button. But he couldn't, because what could he possibly say? That the life he'd built was a lie? That his father's empire was constructed on fraud? That everything Trevor had worked for, every success he'd claimed, was tainted by money stolen from people who'd trusted them? How could he drag Lauren into this nightmare? She deserved better than a man whose last name was becoming synonymous with corruption. Better than late-night legal battles and front-page scandals. Better than a future where every door might slam shut because of who his father was. So Trevor let the calls go to voicemail. And with each unanswered ring, the distance between them grew. Lauren noticed the shift immediately. At first, she told herself it was stress. Trevor was dealing with a family crisis, of course he'd pull back, of course he'd need space. But days turned into weeks, and space turned into silence. She'd text him, "Are you okay? I'm here if you need to talk." He'd respond hours later with something vague, "Dealing with work stuff. I'll call you soon." But he never did. She'd show up at his building, and the doorman would tell her Mr. Brooks wasn't available. She'd try calling from the lobby, and it would go straight to voicemail. Lauren lay awake at night, replaying every conversation, every moment, searching for the things she'd done wrong. Had she pushed too hard, said something that scared him off? Was the relationship too much, too fast? Or maybe, and this thought made her chest ache, maybe he'd finally realized what she'd known all along, that she didn't belong in his world. That she was just a girl from Denver with big dreams and a small bank account, and he was Trevor Brooks, CEO, heir to an empire, a man whose watch cost more than her rent. Maybe he'd gotten bored, maybe the novelty had worn off. Maybe she'd been naive to think someone like him could actually want someone like her. And then that fateful Tuesday morning came and everything got much worse. She'd been feeling off for weeks, exhausted, nauseous, emotional in ways that didn't make sense. She'd chalked it up to stress, to the heartbreak of Trevor's disappearing act. But when her period didn't come, and then didn't come again, dread settled in her stomach like a stone. She bought the test at a drugstore 3 blocks from her apartment, hands shaking as she handed cash to a bored cashier who didn't even look up. Back in her shoebox bathroom, Lauren sat on the edge of the tub and watched 2 pink lines appear. Positive. The world tilted sideways. She was pregnant. With Trevor's child. The man who'd ghosted her. The man who'd promised he'd never become someone who only saw dollar signs, then vanished the second his life got complicated. Lauren's hands trembled as she gripped the test, her vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. She had 2 choices: keep this to herself, or tell him. Every rational part of her brain screamed to stay silent. He didn't want her anymore, that much was clear. Why drag him back into her life? Why give him the power to reject not just her, but their child? But Lauren had grown up without a father. She knew what that absence felt like, the questions that never got answered, the hole that never quite filled. She couldn't do that to her baby. Even if Trevor didn't want her, he deserved to know. And their child deserved the chance to have a father. So Lauren picked up her phone, hands shaking so badly she almost dropped it, and called Trevor one more time. And surprisingly this time, he answered. They met at a coffee shop in Midtown. Neutral ground. Public enough that Lauren felt safe, private enough for the conversation they needed to have. Trevor looked terrible. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His usually impeccable suit was wrinkled. His hair, normally perfectly styled, looked like he'd been running his hands through it for days. "Lauren," he said, his voice rough, "I'm sorry I haven't. I'm pregnant." The words landed like a bomb. Trevor's face went blank. Not angry, not happy, just empty. "What?" Lauren's hands twisted in her lap, her nails digging into her palms. "I'm pregnant. It's yours. I'm about 6 weeks along." Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Trevor's mouth opened, closed. His hands gripped the edge of the table like he was trying to anchor himself to reality. "Are you sure?" he finally managed. "Yes." Lauren's voice was steady, but inside, she was crumbling. "I wouldn't be here if I wasn't." Trevor's face crumpled. He buried his head in his hands, and for a moment, Lauren thought he might cry. "I can't," he whispered. "I can't do this right now." Lauren's stomach dropped. "What do you mean you can't?" "Everything's falling apart, Lauren. The company, my family, my entire life. It's all collapsing. I can barely keep my head above water. I can't." His voice cracked. "I can't bring a child into this chaos." "You don't have a choice." Lauren's voice sharpened. "The baby's already here, so the question isn't whether you can do this. The question is whether you will." Trevor looked at her, and in his eyes, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Fear. Not the fear of responsibility or fatherhood. The fear of a man who'd already made up his mind. "I'm sorry," Trevor said, his voice hollow. "I'm so sorry, Lauren, but I can't be what you need right now. I can't be what this baby needs." Lauren felt her heart shatter into 1,000 jagged pieces. "So that's it?" Her voice trembled with rage and grief. "You're just walking away. It's better this way." Trevor's hands shook as he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. "You'll be better off without me. Trust me." He slid the envelope across the table. Lauren stared at it like it was a snake. "What is that?" $50,000. Trevor couldn't meet her eyes. For the baby, for whatever you need, I'll set up more if… You think you can pay me off? Lauren's voice rose, heads turning in the coffee shop. You don't even think we can go through this together? You think money fixes this? It's not. Trevor's face twisted with anguish. I'm not trying to fix anything. I'm trying to help. You're trying to buy your guilt. Lauren stood, the chair scraping harshly against the floor. You're trying to reduce our child to a transaction so you can sleep at night. Lauren, please. No. Tears streamed down her face now, hot and furious. You don't get to do this. You don't get to promise me you'd never become one of those men, then turn into exactly that the second things get hard. She grabbed the envelope, ripped it open, and let the check flutter to the table. $50,000. Made out to cash. Signed in Trevor's neat, precise handwriting. Lauren tore it in half. Then in half again. And again. The pieces scattered across the table like confetti at a funeral. Keep your money, she said, her voice breaking. I don't want anything from you. Not your guilt, not your regret, nothing. Trevor's face was white. Lauren, but she was already walking away, her vision blurred with tears, her hands pressed against her stomach where their child was growing. She didn't look back. Trevor sat in that coffee shop for 2 hours after Lauren left, staring at the torn pieces of the check. He'd done the right thing. He'd protected her from the chaos, from the scandal, from the weight of his family's crimes. She'd be better off without him. She had to be. But as Trevor finally forced himself to stand, to walk out into the cold Manhattan afternoon, one thought kept circling through his mind. What have I done? In the weeks that followed, 2 lives diverged. Trevor buried himself in saving Brooks Enterprises. 18-hour days, emergency board meetings, negotiations with federal prosecutors. He gave up sleep, friends, any semblance of a normal life. The company survived, barely. His father went to prison. The Brooks name became a cautionary tale whispered in business schools and boardrooms. But Trevor rebuilt. Slowly, painfully, he clawed his way back. New investments, new partnerships, a redemption arc that looked good on paper. At night, alone in his penthouse, he'd pull up Lauren's contact in his phone. His thumb would hover over her name, but he never called. Because what right did he have? He'd made his choice. He'd walked away. He'd chosen his empire over her, over their child. Some choices, once made, couldn't be undone. Meanwhile, Lauren returned to Denver. She moved back into her childhood home, a small house on the edge of the suburbs with peeling paint and a leaky roof. Her mother had been gone for 3 years, but Lauren couldn't afford rent in New York while pregnant and unemployed. She worked temp jobs, receptionist at a dental office, weekend shifts at a department store, anything that would take a pregnant woman who'd be leaving for maternity leave soon. At night, she'd sit in her old bedroom, hand on her growing belly, and try not to think about Trevor. Try not to wonder if he ever thought about her. Try not to hate him for making her believe in something that was never real. Lauren went to her 12-week ultrasound alone. She lay on the exam table, cold gel spread across her stomach, staring at the ceiling tiles while the technician moved the wand across her belly. Okay, the technician said brightly. Let's see what we've got here. The sound of a heartbeat filled the room. Fast, strong, steady. Lauren's eyes burned. That's a beautiful heartbeat, the technician said. And oh my. Lauren's stomach dropped. What? What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. The technician grinned. You're having twins. The world stopped. What? Twins. See? The technician pointed at the screen, where 2 small shapes flickered. Baby A and baby B, both looking healthy. Congratulations, Mom. Lauren stared at the screen, her vision blurring with tears. Twins. 2 babies. 2 heartbeats. 2 lives depending on her and her alone. The technician kept talking due dates, nutrition, warning signs to watch for, but Lauren couldn't hear anything over the roaring in her ears. She was going to have twins. By herself. No partner. No support system. No safety net. Just her, and whatever strength she could scrape together. When the appointment ended, Lauren walked to her car in a daze. She sat behind the wheel, hands gripping tight, and let herself cry. Not gentle tears, not quiet grief, raw, broken sobs that shook her entire body. Because while Trevor Brooks was busy saving his empire, rebuilding his reputation, convincing himself he'd made the noble choice, Lauren was fighting a different kind of war. A war for survival. And she was fighting it completely alone. My beautiful family, I need to know, have you ever been abandoned by someone you thought would stay forever? Drop a comment, and let me know if Melissa should even give Daniel a chance when we get back to that diner. And if this story is hitting your heart, don't forget to hit that like button, it truly means the world to me. Lauren gave birth on a Tuesday in March, during a snowstorm that shut down half of Denver. She'd gone into labor at 3 a.m., her water breaking while she fumbled for her phone in the dark. No partner to wake, no hand to hold. Just her, alone in her childhood bedroom, trying to remember the breathing exercises from the prenatal class she'd attended by herself. The hospital was chaos, understaffed because of the storm, nurses rushing between rooms, machines beeping urgently somewhere down the hall. Lauren lay in the delivery room, legs in stirrups, surrounded by strangers in scrubs who kept saying encouraging things that meant nothing because none of them was staying. None of them would be there tomorrow, or next week, or 3 months from now when she was drowning in diapers and sleep deprivation. "You're doing great, Mom," a nurse said, squeezing her shoulder. Almost there, but Lauren wasn't doing great. She was terrified. 16 hours of labor, contractions that felt like her body was tearing itself apart. And through it all, one thought kept circling, I can't do this alone. But she didn't have a choice. At 7:23 p.m., Lily was born. 3 pounds, 12 ounces, tiny fists, angry cry, a cap of dark hair that looked exactly like Trevor's. At 7:31 p.m., Noah followed. 4 pounds even, quieter than his sister, hazel eyes that would shift colors depending on the light. The nurses placed them on Lauren's chest, these two impossibly small humans who were now her entire world. And Lauren, exhausted, terrified, overwhelmed, looked down at their faces and made a promise. "I've got you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't know how, but I've got you. Always." Lauren brought the twins home to a studio apartment on the rough side of Denver, 400 square feet, thin walls, a radiator that clanked all night but never quite got warm enough. There was no crib. She couldn't afford one. Instead, Carlos, her neighbor across the hall, had lent her a bassinet his daughter had outgrown. It was old, the fabric faded and torn in places, but it was clean, and it was all Lauren had. She set it beside her bed and placed Lily and Noah inside, their tiny bodies swaddled in blankets from the hospital. Then Lauren sat on the edge of her mattress, which was just a box spring on the floor, and stared at them. 2 babies, completely dependent on her, and she had $73 in her bank account. Panic clawed at her throat. How am I going to do this? But the twins slept, their chests rising and falling in perfect rhythm, and Lauren forced herself to breathe. 1 day at a time, 1 hour, 1 minute if that's all she could manage. She could do this. She had to. Lauren went back to work when the twins were 6 weeks old. She had no choice. Maternity leave wasn't an option when you were unemployed. Bills didn't stop because you'd just given birth. Rent didn't pause because you were exhausted and terrified and barely holding it together. She found a job as a night receptionist at a 24-hour urgent care clinic. Minimum wage, no benefits. But it was something. Carlos watched the twins while she worked. He was a single dad himself. His daughter, Rosa, was 8, and he understood what it meant to survive on your own. "Go," he'd say when Lauren hesitated at his door, guilt eating her alive. "They'll be fine. Rosa loves babies." So Lauren would kiss Lily and Noah goodbye, her heart shattering every single time, and take the bus across town to sit behind a plexiglass window and check in patients with broken bones and stomach flu. She'd come home at 6 a.m., just as the twins were waking up, feed them, change them, spend 2 precious hours soaking in their smiles before Carlos took over again so Lauren could sleep. On weekends, she did freelance design work, logos for small businesses, flyers for church events, anything that paid. She'd work on her ancient laptop while the twins napped, racing against the clock before they woke up, screaming for food or attention, or just because they needed their mother. Lauren lived in a constant state of exhaustion. She couldn't remember the last time she'd slept more than 3 hours straight. Couldn't remember what it felt like to not have her shoulders tensed up around her ears, waiting for the next crisis. But she kept going, because what else could she do? When Lily took her first steps, Lauren was at work. Carlos sent her a video, Lily wobbling across his living room, Rosa cheering in the background, Lily's face lit up with joy and surprise. Lauren watched the video in the clinic bathroom, tears streaming down her face, and hated herself. She should have been there, should have seen it in person, not through a phone screen. Should have been the one to catch Lily when she fell, to clap and cheer, and make her daughter feel like she'd just conquered the world. But she'd been checking in a man with a broken wrist instead. That's what survival looked like. Missing milestones, watching your children grow up in fragments, in stolen moments between shifts and bills, and the relentless grind of just trying to keep everyone alive. When Noah had his first asthma attack, Lauren was mid-shift at the clinic. Carlos called, his voice tight with panic. "Lauren, something's wrong with Noah. He can't breathe right. He's wheezing and his lips are turning blue." Lauren's world stopped. "Call 911, she said, already grabbing her coat. "I'm coming. Call 911 right now." She ran 6 blocks to the bus stop, her lungs burning, her heart slamming so hard it hurt. Took the bus across town, every second stretching into eternity, prayers running through her mind like a mantra. Please let him be okay. Please, please. By the time she got to the hospital, Noah was stable, oxygen mask on his tiny face, Carlos pacing the waiting room with Lily asleep on his shoulder. The doctor explained, asthma, likely triggered by environmental factors. Noah would need an inhaler, regular checkups, maybe allergy testing down the line. "Do you have insurance?" the doctor asked. Lauren's stomach sank. No. The doctor's expression shifted, not judgmental, just resigned, like he'd heard that answer 1,000 times before. "The inhaler will run about $60. You can get it at any pharmacy." $60. Lauren had 40 in her account. Rent was due in 3 days. She looked at Noah, her baby, her son, struggling to breathe because she couldn't afford to give him clean air, and something inside her cracked. "I'll figure it out," she said, her voice hollow. She always did, even when it meant choosing between rent and medicine, between food and electricity, between her children's needs and her own dignity. She always figured it out. The eviction notice came on a Friday. Lauren stared at the paper taped to her door, the words blurring together. Failure to pay rent, 14 days to vacate. Legal action. She was 3 months behind. 3 months of choosing groceries over rent, of choosing heat over the landlord, of hoping maybe this month would be different. It never was. Lauren took the notice inside, set it on the counter, and stared at it until the letters stopped making sense. She didn't cry. She was too exhausted to cry. She just sat on the floor, back against the cabinet, and tried to figure out how to keep a roof over her children's heads. Carlos helped her negotiate with the landlord, helped her set up a payment plan, lent her money she swore she'd pay back even though they both knew she probably couldn't. "You'd do the same for me," Carlos said when she tried to thank him. Lauren wasn't sure that was true, wasn't sure she had anything left to give anyone, but she nodded anyway. 5 solid years of raising the children went by, but it had never prepared her for the question that came on that ordinary Tuesday morning. Lauren was braiding Lily's hair before preschool, a program she could barely afford but refused to skip because her kids deserved something normal, something good. When Lily looked up at her with those wide, innocent eyes. "Mummy, why don't we have a daddy like other kids?" Lauren's hands stilled. Noah looked up from his coloring book, suddenly interested. Lauren swallowed hard, searching for an answer that was honest but not devastating. "Sometimes," she said carefully, "families look different. Some kids have a mummy and a daddy, some have 2 mummies or 2 daddies, some just have 1 parent, but all of them have love. And we have so much love, don't we? "But where's our daddy?" Noah asked, his voice small. Lauren's throat closed. He had to be somewhere else, baby. But that doesn't mean he doesn't care about you." The lie tasted bitter, because the truth that their father had chosen his empire over them, that he'd reduced their existence to a check Lauren had torn into pieces, was too cruel for 6-year-olds to hear. "Do you think he'd like us?" Lily asked. "If he met us?" Lauren's vision blurred. "He'd love you, both of you, so much." She hoped that was true, but she honestly didn't know. Every night, after the twins were asleep, Lauren would lock herself in the bathroom and cry, quietly, into a towel, so they wouldn't hear. She'd sit on the edge of the tub and let herself break down, let out all the fear and rage and exhaustion she couldn't show her children during the day. Some nights she cried because she was tired. Some nights because she felt like a failure. Some nights because she missed the life she'd imagined before everything fell apart. But every night she'd wash her face, take a breath, and walk back out into the apartment with a smile. Because her children needed her to be strong, even when she felt like she was shattering. But there were good moments too, small ones, fragile, but real. Carlos would show up with groceries when he knew her paycheck hadn't come through. "Rosa insisted we get the wrong kind of cereal," he'd say with a wink, handing over a bag full of food. "Mind taking it off my hands?" Lauren would pretend to believe him. The twins made her a card for her birthday, construction paper covered in crayon drawings and glitter that got everywhere. "Best mommy," it said in Lily's careful handwriting. Noah had drawn a lopsided heart. Lauren kept it on her nightstand. On the worst days, she'd look at it and remember why she was fighting. One afternoon, the twins presented her with a necklace. It was cheap plastic beads on a fraying string, purchased at a thrift store with their allowance money from helping Carlos rake leaves. "It's a heart," Lily explained, pointing at the pendant. "Because you're our heart, Mummy." Lauren put it on and never took it off. Years later, when the clasp broke and the beads faded, she'd still wear it, a reminder of the day her children reminded her that love didn't cost anything. On the twins' 5th birthday, Lauren stood in their tiny apartment, watching them blow out candles on a grocery store cake, and made herself a promise. "I will give them better," she whispered. "Whatever it takes, I will." She didn't know how, didn't know if it was even possible, but she'd keep fighting, keep surviving, keep choosing them, every single day, until her last breath. Because they deserved everything, and she'd burn herself to ashes if that's what it took to give it to them. But 6 years later, in a roadside diner with fading balloons and a split cupcake, everything Lauren had built on her own, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every moment of hard-won survival was about to crumble, because the man she'd spent 6 years trying to forget had just walked back into her life. And this time, he wasn't leaving without a fight. 5 years after his father went to prison, Trevor Brooks stood on stage at the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, accepting an award for Business Leader of the Year. The applause was deafening. 500 people in designer suits and evening gowns, champagne glasses raised, cameras flashing. The CEO of Brooks Enterprises, the man who'd saved his company from complete destruction, who'd turned scandal into comeback story, who'd doubled the company's value in half a decade. Trevor smiled, shook hands, delivered a speech about perseverance and integrity that had been written by his PR team. "When everything falls apart," he said into the microphone, his voice steady and confident, "that's when you discover who you really are. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to prove that the Brooks name still means something." More applause, more cameras, a standing ovation that felt choreographed. Trevor held the crystal trophy, heavy, expensive, meaningless, and felt absolutely nothing. The Forbes cover came 6 months later, The Redemption of Trevor Brooks, How One Man Rebuilt an Empire from Ashes. His face stared back from newsstands across the country, confident, successful, the picture of American achievement. The article detailed his rise, the scandal, the investigation, the way he'd cooperated with federal prosecutors and restructured the entire company, new partnerships, ethical investments, a complete overhaul of corporate culture. Brooks Enterprises was now worth $2.3 billion. Trevor was 34 years old and one of the wealthiest men in the country. Women threw themselves at him, heiresses, models, executives who saw his last name and dollar signs. They'd show up at charity galas in dresses that cost more than most people's cars, laughing at his jokes, touching his arm, making it clear they were available. Trevor would smile, dance, sometimes take them to dinner, but he never took them home, because every single one of them felt like cardboard, flat, lifeless, going through motions that meant nothing. None of them looked at him the way Lauren had, like he was just a man, not a bank account, like his worth had nothing to do with his net worth. None of them made him feel real. Trevor kept Lauren's contact saved in his phone. He'd upgraded his phone 3 times over the years. Each time, he'd transferred everything, every contact, every photo, every scrap of data, including her number. He never called it, never texted, but he couldn't delete it either. Sometimes, late at night when the penthouse was too quiet and sleep wouldn't come, Trevor would pull up her contact and just stare at it. Lauren Carter. 2 words that carried the weight of every mistake he'd ever made. He'd hover his thumb over the call button, his heart racing, imagining what he'd say if she answered. "I'm sorry. I was wrong. I think about you every day." But he never pressed it, because what right did he have? He'd made his choice 6 years ago. He'd walked away. He'd chosen his empire over her, over their child. Some doors, once closed, stayed closed. The dreams started 2 years after he left, always the same. A child, faceless, nameless, standing in a doorway, reaching for him. Trevor would try to move, try to get closer, but his feet were stuck. The child would call for him, voice small and desperate, and Trevor would wake up gasping, sweat soaking through his sheets. He never saw the child's face, never heard a name, just felt the overwhelming sense of loss, of something precious slipping through his fingers. He told himself it was guilt, stress, the weight of everything he'd sacrificed. But deep down, Trevor knew the truth. He was haunted by the life he'd destroyed. His therapist, a woman named Dr. Patricia Reeves, who'd been treating him for insomnia and anxiety since the scandal broke, finally asked the question Trevor had been avoiding for years. "What are you running from, Trevor?" They were in her office on the 40th floor of a building in Midtown, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Expensive furniture, the kind of therapy only wealthy people could afford. Trevor stared out at the skyline. "I'm not running from anything. You work 18-hour days. You haven't taken a vacation in 5 years. You turn down every personal relationship that gets too close. You're exhausted, isolated, and by your own admission, you haven't felt genuinely happy since." She paused, consulting her notes. "Since before the scandal." Trevor's jaw tightened. "So, I'll ask again," Dr. Reeves said gently. "What are you running from?" The words came out before Trevor could stop them. "The only real thing I ever had, and I destroyed it." Silence filled the office. Dr. Reeves leaned forward. "Tell me about her." So, Trevor did. He told her about Lauren, about the way she'd challenged him from the moment they met, about coffee that turned into dinners, dinners that turned into late-night conversations where Trevor forgot to be the CEO and just existed as himself. He told her about the kiss in his penthouse, about the promise he'd made and broken. He told her about the pregnancy, the coffee shop, the check he'd left like he could buy his way out of responsibility. "I thought I was protecting her," Trevor said, his voice hollow. "From the scandal, from my family, from everything falling apart, but I was just protecting myself, from the fear of failing her, of not being enough." "And now?" Dr. Reeves asked. Trevor looked at his hands. "Now I've built everything I was supposed to build, and it means nothing." 3 years after he left Lauren, Trevor hired a private investigator. He told himself it was just to know she was okay, to confirm she'd moved on, found someone better, built a life that didn't include him. The investigator, a former cop named Rita Chang, came back with a report 2 weeks later. "She went back to Denver," Rita said, sliding a folder across Trevor's desk. "Working as a night receptionist at an urgent care clinic, living in a studio apartment on the east side, No social media presence. Keeps to herself. Trevor's hands shook as he opened the folder. There were photos. Lauren walking out of her apartment building, looking tired. Lauren at a bus stop, staring at her phone. Lauren in scrubs, heading into work. She looked thinner, older. The light in her eyes, the one that had drawn Trevor to her in the first place, seemed dimmed. "Anything else?" Trevor asked, his voice tight. Rita hesitated. "She's got a kid. Maybe two, hard to tell from the photos. Looks like a neighbor helps with childcare." Trevor's heart stopped. A kid. Could be. Saw her with a stroller a few times. But I didn't dig deeper. You said basic information only. Trevor stared at the photos, his mind racing. A kid. Maybe two. His kid. His kids. They were real. Not just an abstract concept, not just a choice he'd made in a coffee shop. Real children, living and breathing and growing up without him. "Do you want me to keep digging?" Rita asked. "Get names, ages, confirmation." Trevor's thumb traced the edge of Lauren's photo. He should say yes, should get the full picture, should know everything. But fear clamped down on his chest. What if he found out the truth and it destroyed him? What if he learned he had children who didn't know his name, who had no idea he existed, and it became real in a way he couldn't undo? "No," Trevor said finally, closing the folder. "That's enough." Rita nodded, unsurprised. "You want me to keep tabs? Monthly check-ins?" "No, we're done." Rita left, taking the folder with her. Trevor had asked her to destroy everything, photos, notes, all of it. He told himself it was better this way, that Lauren had moved on, that she'd built a life and he had no right to disrupt it. He told himself the kid was probably from someone else, that the timeline didn't match, that he was seeing patterns where none existed. He told himself a lot of lies, and he almost believed them. 6 years after he walked away, Trevor flew to Denver for a business deal. Brooks Enterprises was acquiring a commercial real estate portfolio, 3 buildings downtown, prime locations, solid investment. Routine, boring, the kind of deal Trevor could close in his sleep. His assistant, Kim, had arranged everything. Meetings, hotel, car service, every detail planned to the minute. But the morning of the final contract signing, Trevor woke up restless. He'd barely slept. The dream, again, the faceless child, the desperate reaching, the suffocating sense of loss. Trevor stood in his hotel room, staring out at the Denver skyline, and felt the weight of 6 years pressing down on him. He was in Lauren's city, the place she'd come back to, the place where she'd raised their child, if that's what the investigator had seen. He could look for her, could try to find her, could finally face the choice he'd made and the wreckage he'd left behind. But the fear that had ruled him for 6 years kept him frozen. The meeting ran long. By the time Trevor finished signing contracts and shaking hands, it was nearly 2 p.m. and he hadn't eaten. Kim suggested a restaurant downtown, somewhere upscale, appropriate for a CEO. But Trevor was tired of upscale, tired of appropriate, tired of everything feeling curated and empty. "I'll find something on my own," he told Kim. "Take the afternoon off." He drove aimlessly through Denver's streets, no destination in mind, just needing to move, needing to feel something other than the hollow ache that had become his constant companion. He ended up in a suburban neighborhood, modest homes, tree-lined streets, a roadside diner with a flickering neon sign that said Millie's. Trevor pulled into the parking lot, telling himself he just needed coffee, just needed a moment to breathe before flying back to New York and the life that felt more like a prison every day. He walked toward the entrance, sunglasses on even though the sky was overcast, and glanced through the window, and that's when he saw her, Lauren, sitting at a wobbly table beneath fading balloons, her hands trembling as she stared at her phone. Trevor's world tilted. She looked exhausted, thinner than he remembered. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, her clothes simple and worn. But it was her, unmistakably her. And then Trevor saw them. 2 children, a girl and a boy, maybe 5, maybe 6, blowing out candles on a cupcake that looked like it came from a gas station. The girl had his mother's nose. The boy had his eyes. Trevor's legs gave out. He stumbled backward, catching himself on the diner's exterior wall, his heart slamming so hard he thought it might stop. Twins. He had twins. Not one child, two. Two lives he'd never known about. Two faces that mirrored his own childhood photos. Two birthdays he'd missed. Two first steps. Two first words. Two entire existences that had happened without him. Trevor couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process the magnitude of what he was seeing. For 6 years, he'd told himself Lauren had moved on, that the child, if there even was a child, wasn't his, that he'd made the right choice walking away. For 6 years, he'd built an empire, convinced himself success could fill the void. For 6 years, he'd lied, and in that instant, watching Lauren force a smile for their children while her hands shook with what he now recognized as desperation, every lie Trevor had told himself shattered like glass. He hadn't protected her. He'd abandoned her. He hadn't made the noble choice. He'd made the coward's choice. And those two beautiful children, his children, had grown up without a father because Trevor had been too afraid to stay. The realization hit him like a freight train. He had a chance, right now. Right here, to walk through that door and face everything he'd run from, to finally do the right thing. Trevor took a step toward the entrance, and then he stopped. Because what right did he have to walk back into their lives now, after 6 years, after everything? But as he stood there, paralyzed by fear and regret and the weight of every choice he'd ever made, another man walked into the diner. Work boots, flannel shirt, a gift in his hands. And Trevor watched his children's faces light up, watched Lauren's shoulders relax, watched this stranger, this man who'd been there when Trevor hadn't become the hero Trevor should have been. That's when Trevor knew. He'd lost more than Lauren 6 years ago. He'd lost everything that mattered. And getting it back, if it was even possible, would require facing every demon he'd spent 6 years running from. So Trevor pushed open the diner door and walked straight into the reckoning he'd been avoiding for 6 years. Trevor couldn't stop staring. Every detail of their faces burned into his memory like photographs he'd never be able to forget. The girl, Lily, he'd heard Lauren call her, had his mother's nose. That distinctive slope, slightly upturned at the end. The same nose Trevor had inherited but never noticed until he saw it reflected in his daughter's face. She also had Lauren's smile, wide and bright, even as she leaned over the sad little cupcake with pure joy. The boy Noah had Trevor's eyes, not just the color, though that hazel shade was unmistakable, but the way they shifted in the light, the slight upturn at the outer corners, the intensity even in a 6-year-old's gaze. He also had Trevor's serious expression, that focused look when concentrating on something important. Right now, making a birthday wish. 6 years old. The math clicked into place with brutal clarity. Lauren would have been about 2 months pregnant when he left. Maybe she hadn't even known yet. Or maybe she had, and the coffee shop meeting had been her last desperate attempt to tell him before he disappeared completely. Either way, Trevor had missed everything. First, ultrasounds. The moment she learned it was twins. Her entire pregnancy, had she been sick, scared, alone? The birth. Their first cry, first smile, first word, first step. 6 years of existence that happened without him. 6 birthdays celebrated in places like this, cheap diners with fading balloons and split cupcakes, because Lauren was doing it alone. Because Trevor had left her with nothing. His heart pounded so hard it felt like his ribs might crack. The sound filled his ears, drowning out the diner noise, the clinking silverware, the buzz of conversation. All he could hear was his own pulse screaming, "Those are your children, your children, your children." And beneath that, a quieter voice, poisoned with shame, "And you abandoned them." Meanwhile, Lauren's hands trembled as she gripped her phone beneath the table. The landlord's voice was firm, unsympathetic. "Miss Carter, I've been patient, but this is the 3rd month. I need the rent by Wednesday or I'm starting eviction proceedings." "I understand," Lauren whispered, turning slightly away from the twins so they wouldn't hear the desperation in her voice. "I'll have it, I promise. Just please, please give me until Wednesday." Wednesday, final deadline. The line went dead. Lauren stared at her phone, the screen blurring as tears threatened. $8. She had $8 until Friday. Rent was $950. The math was impossible. She could ask Carlos for another loan, but she already owed him $300 she couldn't pay back. She could pick up extra shifts, but there weren't any available. She could sell something, but she'd already sold everything worth selling. "Mommy, look." Lily held up a French fry shaped like a heart. "It's perfect." Lauren forced her face into a smile. "It is, baby. Just like you." This was her life, performing happiness while drowning in terror, pretending everything was fine while calculating whether she could skip meals to stretch groceries further. But her babies deserved this moment, this one afternoon where they felt celebrated and loved and normal, even if it was all held together with $30 and prayers. Lauren took a breath, steadying herself, and looked up, and that's when she saw him. Time stopped. Trevor Brooks stood 15 feet away, half hidden behind a menu, staring directly at her table, at her children, at their children. Lauren's blood turned to ice. Her vision tunneled. The diner sounds, music, conversation, the hiss of the coffee machine all faded into white noise. It couldn't be him. Not here. Not now. Not on her children's birthday in the one place she'd thought was safe. But it was. 6 years older. Still painfully handsome. Still wearing that expression of controlled authority that made people step aside when he walked into rooms. Except right now, he looked anything but controlled. He looked shattered. Their eyes met across the diner, and Lauren felt every wall she'd built over 6 years crack down the middle. Fear hit her first. Raw, primal terror that he'd come to take her children, to use his money and power and lawyers to rip them away from her. Then rage. Hot and vicious. How dare he show up here? How dare he invade this space, this moment, this life she'd built from nothing after he'd destroyed her? Then shock. Because in 6 years, she'd convinced herself she'd never see him again, that he'd moved on completely, that she and the twins were footnotes in his story, easily forgotten. But the look on his face, devastated, horrified, desperate, told a different story. He knew. Somehow, he knew they were his. Lauren's hand shot out instinctively, pulling Lily and Noah closer to her sides. "Mommy?" Noah looked up, confusion in his hazel eyes, Trevor's eyes. "What's wrong?" "Nothing, baby." Lauren's voice shook. "Everything's fine." But everything was not fine. Because Trevor was standing now, his menu falling forgotten to the table, his entire body rigid with shock, and Lauren's carefully constructed world was about to implode. The diner door chimed. Carlos walked in, work boots tracking in dirt from the construction site, a wrapped gift tucked under his arm. His daughter Rosa had helped him pick it out, a telescope kit the twins had been talking about for months. "There's my favorite space explorers," Carlos called out, his voice warm and familiar. The twins' faces transformed. "Carlos!" They shrieked in unison, scrambling out of their seats. They crashed into him like he was their whole world. Carlos laughed, catching them both, ruffling Noah's hair and handing the gift to Lily. "Happy birthday, you two. Your mom told me cupcakes were the theme this year." "We love cupcakes." Lily bounced on her toes. "And rockets. Look, it has rockets on the balloons." Lauren watched Carlos with the twins, and for a moment, just a moment, her terror eased. Carlos had been her lifeline for 6 years, her neighbor, her friend, the only person who'd shown up when everyone else disappeared. He wasn't their father, he'd never tried to be, but he was present in ways that mattered, steady, reliable, safe, everything Trevor had never been. Carlos pulled Lauren into a brief side hug, the kind of casual affection that came from years of shared struggle. "You holding up okay?" Before Lauren could answer, his eyes drifted past her and landed on Trevor. Carlos's expression shifted immediately. Not to the friendly warmth he showed the twins, but to something guarded, protective. "Lauren," he said quietly. "Who's that?" Lauren's throat closed. She couldn't form words, because Trevor was moving now, pushing away from his booth, his face pale, his eyes locked on the twins with an intensity that made Lauren's pulse spike. Panic flooded Lauren's system. "I need to leave," she said, her voice sharp. Right now. What? Carlos's brow furrowed. Why? We just got here. Carlos, please. Lauren grabbed her purse, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. I need to get them out of here. Now. Lauren, what's wrong? Carlos's voice dropped, his hand moving instinctively to shield the twins. Are you in danger? Is that guy? But before Lauren could answer, before she could gather the twins and run, Trevor was already crossing the diner. His steps were unsteady. His expensive shoes squeaked against the linoleum. Every eye in the diner turned to watch this man in a $1,000 suit, walking toward a table with fading balloons and a split cupcake. Lauren, Trevor said, his voice cracking on her name, and everything Lauren had buried for 6 years erupted. Don't. Lauren's voice cut through the diner like a blade. Don't you dare say my name. Trevor stopped 3 feet away, his hands raised like he was approaching a wild animal, like she was the threat. The twins pressed against her legs, sensing the tension even if they didn't understand it. Mommy? Lily's voice was small. Who is that man? No one, Lauren said, her eyes never leaving Trevor's face. No one important. Trevor flinched like she'd struck him. Lauren, please, he said, his voice shaking. I just need 5 minutes. 5 minutes to explain. Explain? Lauren's laugh was broken glass. You want to explain? Here? Now? In front of them? Carlos stepped forward, positioning himself between Trevor and the twins. I don't know who you are, but you need to back off. Now. Trevor's eyes flicked to Carlos, confusion, and something that looked like jealousy crossing his face. Who are you? Someone who shows up, Carlos shot back. Which is more than I can say for you, apparently. Carlos, don't. Lauren's hand touched his arm. It's okay, I've got this. But she didn't have this. She was drowning, falling apart. 6 years of carefully maintained control shattering in front of her children. Noah tugged on her sleeve. Mommy, you're shaking. I'm fine, baby. Lauren crouched down, forcing herself to look at her children instead of Trevor. Why don't you go with Carlos for just a minute? I need to talk to this man. But who is he? Lily asked, her eyes wide with curiosity and fear. Just someone from a long time ago. Lauren's voice cracked. Someone who doesn't matter anymore. Then why are you crying? Noah whispered. Lauren hadn't realized she was. She touched her face, felt the tears she'd been trying to hold back. Sometimes, she said softly, people from our past show up and remind us of things we'd rather forget, but that doesn't mean they get to stay, okay? The twins nodded, uncertain. Carlos gathered them up, shooting Trevor a look that promised violence if he stepped out of line. Come on, you two. Let's check out that arcade game in the corner. As they walked away, Lily looked back over Carlos's shoulder, her expression troubled. He looks sad, Mummy. Lauren's throat closed. I know, baby. And then it was just Lauren and Trevor. 6 years of silence between them. 6 years of rage and pain and unanswered questions. Lauren stood slowly, her entire body trembling. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut deeper than any scream. You have 5 seconds to tell me why you're here, and then you leave. Forever. Trevor's face crumpled. I didn't know. Lauren, I swear to God, I didn't know about them. If I had, you didn't want to know. Her words were ice. You left a check and a note like I was some kind of problem you could pay to disappear. You don't get to show up 6 years later and pretend you care. I never stopped caring. Then where were you? Her voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. Where were you when I was giving birth alone? Where were you when I couldn't afford diapers? Where were you when Lily stopped breathing and I had to choose between calling an ambulance or paying rent? Each question was a knife, and Trevor took every blow without defense. I didn't know, he started. Because you didn't ask. Lauren's tears came freely now, hot and furious. You made a choice, Trevor. You chose your empire over us. You chose your reputation, your company, your perfect life over me and our child. And now you stand here, 6 years later, expecting what? Forgiveness? Understanding? No. Trevor's voice broke. I don't expect anything. But those kids, He gestured toward the arcade corner where Lily and Noah stood with Carlos, watching with wide, frightened eyes. "Those are my children, and I can't walk away again." "I won't." Lauren's laugh was bitter. "You don't have a choice. They're not yours." "What?" "These are my children, Trevor. Mine, not yours." Lauren's voice turned to steel. "You lost that right the second you walked away. You gave up that claim when you left a check, like I was some kind of problem to solve." "Then let me earn it back," Trevor pleaded, desperation bleeding into every word. "Please, however long it takes, whatever it costs, let me try." "Try?" Lauren stared at him in disbelief. "You think you can just try? Like this is some business deal you can negotiate? Like you can earn your way back into their lives with money and guilt? That's not what Do you know what they ask me?" Lauren's voice cracked. "They ask me where their daddy is. They ask why they don't have a father like other kids. And I lie to them. I tell them their father had to be somewhere else, that he cares about them, that he would love them if he knew them. I lie because the truth that you chose to abandon them before they even existed is too cruel for children to hear." Trevor's face twisted with anguish. "I was wrong. I was terrified and selfish and wrong. I thought I was protecting you from the scandal, from my family, from everything falling apart. But I was just protecting myself. From the fear of failing you, of not being enough." "Well, congratulations," Lauren said coldly. "You succeeded. You failed spectacularly." The words hung in the air, brutal and final. Trevor stood there, this powerful man who commanded boardrooms and closed billion-dollar deals, and looked completely broken. "I know," he whispered, "and I've regretted it every single day since." Silence crashed between them. From the arcade corner, Lily called out, "Mommy, can we go home now?" Lauren's chest tightened. Home. Their tiny apartment with the broken heater and the overdue rent notice and the life she'd built from nothing. The life Trevor's money could fix in an instant. And that's what made this so unbearably complicated. Because Lauren had spent 6 years hating him, surviving without him, proving she didn't need him. But now, with eviction looming and Lily's medical bills piling up and exhaustion seeping into her bones, she did need him. And she hated herself for it almost as much as she hated him. Family. What would you do if you were Melissa? Could you forgive someone who abandoned you at your lowest? Comment below. I want to hear your stories. And please, don't forget to subscribe, because this story is about to take a turn none of us saw coming. Outside the diner. The late afternoon sun beat down on the parking lot, heat shimmering off asphalt that smelled like tar and gasoline. Lauren stood beside her beat-up Honda, the same one she'd driven from Denver to New York all those years ago, now held together with duct tape and prayers, and tried to steady her breathing. Inside the diner, through the smudged windows, she could see Lily and Noah pressed against the glass, watching. Their faces were confused, worried, looking to their mother for answers she didn't know how to give. Carlos appeared beside them, saying something that made the twins turn away. He shot Lauren a look through the window, one that clearly asked, "Are you okay?" She nodded, even though it was a lie. Carlos gathered the twins up, guiding them toward his truck parked 3 spaces down. "Come on, you two. I think I've got more birthday surprises in the back. Want to help me look?" "More surprises?" Lily's face lit up despite the tension. "Maybe, if you're lucky." Carlos winked, but his eyes stayed on Lauren, protective and concerned. The twins climbed into his truck, their attention momentarily diverted by whatever Carlos was pretending to search for. Birthday surprises. A few extra minutes. Enough time for Lauren to have the conversation she'd spent 6 years avoiding, and then it was just her and Trevor, standing in a diner parking lot in suburban Denver, 6 years of silence stretching between them like a canyon neither knew how to cross. Trevor stood 5 feet away, hands shoved in his pockets, looking more uncertain than she'd ever seen him. This wasn't the confident CEO who commanded boardrooms. This was a man stripped bare, every carefully constructed wall crumbling. "Thank you," Trevor said quietly, "for not just leaving." "I didn't do it for you," Lauren shot back. "I did it because my children don't need to see their mother fall apart in a diner. They've seen enough of that already." The words landed like a punch. Trevor flinched but didn't look away. "I'm sorry," he said, "for all of it. For showing up like this. For—" "Don't." Lauren held up a hand. "Don't apologize for showing up. Apologize for the 6 years you didn't." Trevor's jaw worked, his throat tight. Where did he even start? How did he explain 6 years of cowardice? "My father embezzled $53 million, Trevor said, the words coming out raw and unsteady. "For over a decade, he stole from investors, from partners, from people who trusted him. And when the federal investigation hit, everything collapsed. The board wanted to dissolve the company. Investors were suing. The media was camped outside my building 24/7. Lauren's expression didn't soften. "I saw the headlines. Then you know what I was dealing with." Trevor ran a hand through his hair, the gesture tired and defeated. "I was drowning. Every day was lawyers and emergency meetings and watching everything my family built turn to ash. And in the middle of all that chaos, you told me you were pregnant. So you ran." Lauren's voice was flat. "I panicked." Trevor's voice cracked. "I looked at you, this woman I loved more than anything, and all I could think was that I'd ruin you, that my family's scandal would destroy your life, that you'd wake up one day and realize you'd tied yourself to a name that meant corruption and fraud, that our child would grow up hearing whispers about their grandfather, the criminal. So you made the decision for me," Lauren said coldly. "You decided I was too weak to handle it." "No." Trevor stepped closer, desperate for her to understand. "I thought I was protecting you, but I was really just protecting myself, from the fear of failing you, from watching you look at me the way everyone else did, like I was a liability instead of a person." Lauren's hands clenched into fists. "You were a coward." "I was." The admission came easily now. "I was terrified and selfish and wrong, and I've spent 6 years trying to convince myself I made the noble choice, that you were better off without me." "Were we?" Lauren challenged. Trevor looked at her, really looked, at the exhaustion carved into her face, the cheap clothes that had been washed so many times they were threadbare, the way she held herself like someone who'd learned to expect disappointment. "No," he whispered. "You weren't." Trevor pulled out his phone with trembling hands, scrolled to his contacts, found her name Lauren Carter, and held up the screen so she could see. "I never deleted your number," he said. 6 years, 3 different phones. I transferred it every time. I'd stare at it some nights, my thumb hovering over the call button, trying to find the courage to press it. Lauren stared at the screen, something flickering across her face. Not forgiveness, not even softening, but maybe the smallest crack in her armor. "Why didn't you?" she asked. "Call, I mean." "Because I was afraid," Trevor's voice broke. "Afraid you'd moved on. Afraid you'd tell me to disappear. Afraid I'd find out I had a child and it would become real in a way I couldn't handle. So you hired someone to find out for you." It wasn't a question. Trevor's stomach dropped. "How did you? You think I didn't notice the woman taking pictures of me at the bus stop 3 years ago?" Lauren's laugh was bitter. "You think I didn't see the same car parked outside my apartment for 2 weeks? I knew someone was watching. I just didn't know if it was you or someone worse." Trevor felt sick. "I stopped her. As soon as she told me you had kids, I made her destroy everything. I didn't want to know the details, didn't want it to be real." "But you already knew," Lauren said quietly. "You just didn't want to face it." "Yes." The admission hung between them. Lauren turned away, staring at the mountains visible in the distance. When she spoke, her voice was hollow, carved out by 6 years of survival. "Do you want to know what it was like?" she asked. "Giving birth to twins alone? Coming home to a studio apartment with no crib, no partner, $73 in my bank account?" Trevor's throat closed. "Lauren, I worked nights while Carlos watched them. I'd come home at 6 in the morning, feed them, spend 2 hours with them, then sleep while he took over again. I missed Lily's first steps because I was at work. I missed Noah's first word. I've spent 6 years choosing between rent and food, between heat and medicine, between my pride and my children's survival." Her voice shook now, raw emotion bleeding through. "There were nights I sat on the bathroom floor crying so hard I thought I'd choke, because I didn't know how I was going to feed them the next day. Nights I considered calling you, begging for help, then stopped because I'd rather starve than give you the satisfaction of knowing you were right, that I couldn't do it alone. Trevor's eyes burned. You shouldn't have had to. But I did. Lauren whirled to face him, tears streaming down her face. You want to know what hurt most? Not the money you left, not even you abandoning me. It was that you thought so little of me, of us, that you didn't even try. You just assumed I'd be better off without you and walked away like we meant nothing. You meant everything. Trevor's voice cracked. You were the only real thing in my entire life, and I destroyed it. Yes, Lauren said simply. You did. The twins ask about you, Lauren said, her voice barely above a whisper. They ask where their daddy is, why they don't have a father like other kids. Trevor's chest tightened. What do you tell them? Lauren met his eyes, and in them, he saw the depth of what his absence had cost. I told them their father was a soldier, she said, that he died a hero overseas before they were born, that he loved them but couldn't be here. The words hit Trevor like a physical blow. You told them I was dead. Better a dead hero than a living coward, Lauren said, her voice hard. Better they think their father sacrificed himself for something noble than know the truth that he chose his empire over them. Trevor felt his world tilt. His children thought he was dead. They mourned a father who never existed while the real one stood 15 feet away, alive and guilty. Let me fix this, Trevor said desperately. Let me tell them the truth. Let me be their father. Please, be their father. Lauren's laugh was harsh. You think you can just walk back in after 6 years and play daddy, buy them toys and take them to baseball games and pretend you didn't abandon them? No. Trevor stepped closer, his hands raised in supplication. I want to earn it. However long it takes. Whatever you need from me. I'll show up every day. I'll prove I'm not running again. Why? Lauren demanded. Why now? Because you saw them through a window. Because your guilt finally caught up with you. Because I've spent 6 years living a lie, Trevor said, his voice raw. I built an empire, made millions, got everything I thought I wanted, and it all meant nothing. Every success felt empty. Every night I dreamed about a child I'd never met. I convinced myself I made the right choice, but the truth is I've been dead inside since the day I walked away from you. Lauren stared at him, searching his face for the lie, for the crack that would prove he'd run again. You really think you can do this? She asked quietly. Be a father? Show up when it's hard, when it's messy, when there's no glory in it. I don't know, Trevor admitted, but I want to try. I need to try. Because those kids, our kids, they deserve better than what I gave them, and so do you. Lauren was silent for a long moment. Then she took a shaking breath, and when she spoke, her voice was barely audible. There's something else you don't know. Trevor's stomach dropped. What? Lily has a heart condition. The words came out broken, like they cost her everything to say. Congenital heart defect. She needs surgery, valve replacement, maybe more depending on what they find. Soon. The world stopped spinning. How soon? 3 months. Maybe 4. Lauren's hands twisted together, knuckles white. I've been working every extra shift I can. I've sold everything. I've begged for payment plans. But it's not enough. It's never enough. The surgery costs $160,000 and I have $800 in savings. Trevor's mind raced. $160,000. Pocket change for him. Life or death for Lily. I'll pay for it, he said immediately. All of it. Whatever she needs, specialists, the best surgeons, aftercare, everything. Of course you will. Lauren's laugh was bitter and broken. That's what you do, right? Throw money at problems until they go away? That's not. Your money might save her life, Trevor. Lauren's voice cracked. And I hate that. I hate that after 6 years of doing it alone, of proving I don't need you, the universe puts me in a position where I do. Where my daughter's life depends on the man who abandoned us. So let me help, Trevor pleaded. Let me do this one thing right. And then what? Lauren demanded. You pay for the surgery and suddenly you get to be their father? You buy your way into their lives with a medical bill? No. Trevor shook his head desperately. It's not about buying anything. It's about you finally facing consequences, Lauren interrupted. It's about you realizing that your choices have costs, and this time, the cost isn't just money or reputation. It's a 6-year-old girl who might die because her father chose an empire over her existence. The words were brutal, deserved, true. Trevor stood in that parking lot, the late afternoon sun beating down, and felt the full weight of every choice he'd made. "I'll pay for the surgery," he said quietly. "No conditions, no strings, whether you let me into their lives or not, because she's my daughter, and she deserves to live." "She's my daughter," Lauren corrected, her voice steel wrapped in exhaustion. "She stopped being yours the day you left that check." "I know," Trevor's voice broke, "but let me save her anyway. And then, if you want me to disappear forever, I will. But please, let me do this." Lauren stared at him, tears streaming down her face, caught between pride and desperation, because her daughter's life hung in the balance, and the man who could save her was the same man who'd destroyed her. And in that moment, Trevor realized the cruelest truth of all. His absence had nearly cost him everything he'd ever loved, but his presence might cost Lauren the one thing she had left her: independence. The thing she'd fought for, bled for, built her entire survival around. And Trevor didn't know which would hurt her more: saving her daughter with his money, or watching Lily die to protect her pride. They sat in Lauren's car, the Honda, with the cracked windshield and passenger seat held together with duct tape because it was the only private space they had. Trevor looked completely out of place, his $1,000 suit against her torn upholstery, his polished shoes on her floor mats covered in fast food wrappers and crayon drawings. But he didn't seem to notice, or if he did, he didn't care. "I want to do more than just the surgery," Trevor said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "Let me get you out of that apartment. Let me set you up somewhere safe, stable. Let me pay off your debts. Let me—" "Stop," Lauren held up a hand. "Just stop." Trevor fell silent. Lauren stared through the windshield at the diner where her children pressed their faces against Carlos's truck windows, watching, always watching. "You don't get to fix everything with money," she said quietly. "You don't get to erase 6 years of abandonment with a checkbook. I know that. Do you?" Lauren turned to face him. "Because that's exactly what you're trying to do. Throw enough money at the problem until your guilt goes away. That's not what this is." Trevor's voice cracked. "I just want to help. I want to give you what you should have had all along. What we should have had was you." The words came out sharp, unforgiving. "Not your money. You. Showing up, being present, choosing us." Trevor's face crumpled. "I can't go back and fix that, but I can do this. Please, let me." Lauren was quiet for a long moment, her hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping her anchored. "Okay," she said finally. "You can pay for Lily's surgery, you can help with medical bills, but that's it." "Lauren, that's it," she repeated, her voice firm. "You don't get to be their dad, you don't get to walk back into their lives and play father. You get to be a donor, a benefactor, someone who helped when we needed it, nothing more." The terms were brutal. Trevor felt each word like a knife. "And what do I tell them?" he asked, his voice hollow. "When they ask who I am, you tell them you're a friend of mine who wanted to help." Lauren's jaw tightened. "You tell them whatever keeps them from getting their hearts broken when you inevitably leave again." "I'm not going to leave. You already did once." Lauren's eyes blazed. "And I won't let you do that to them. So these are my terms. Take them or leave them." Trevor stared at her, this woman he'd loved and destroyed, and nodded. "Okay," he whispered. "Whatever you want, I'll do it, even if it killed him." 2 days later, Lauren brought the twins to a park near the hospital where Lily would have her pre-surgery consultations. Trevor waited on a bench, his palms sweating, his heart racing faster than it had during any business deal he'd ever closed. This was more important than empires. These were his children. Lauren approached with Lily and Noah on either side of her, their small hands gripping hers. They looked at Trevor with curiosity and caution, the way children look at strangers who might be dangerous or might be kind. "Babies," Lauren said, crouching down to their level. "This is Trevor. He's a friend of mine from a long time ago. He wants to help us with Lily's surgery." Lily tilted her head, studying Trevor with those sharp, analytical eyes she'd inherited from him. "Are you a superhero?" Trevor blinked. "What? You look like one from TV." Lily's voice was matter-of-fact. "The rich ones who help people. Despite everything, the pain, the regret, the weight of 6 lost years," Trevor felt a smile tug at his lips. "I'm not a superhero," he said softly. "Just someone who wants to help." Noah stepped forward, his expression far more suspicious than his sister's. He had Lauren's wariness, her hard-won caution. "Why are you helping us?" Noah asked, his small voice sharp. "Nobody helps us." The question hit Trevor like a freight train. Nobody helps us. 6 years old, and already this boy had learned that the world was harsh and help was rare. Trevor crouched down so he was eye-level with them, his throat tight with emotion he couldn't quite swallow. "Because your mum is the bravest person I've ever known," he said, his voice rough. "And you two are pretty incredible yourselves." Lily grinned. "Mommy says we're her whole world." "I bet you are," Trevor whispered, his eyes burning. Noah remained unconvinced. "But why do you care?" Trevor glanced at Lauren, who stood a few feet away, arms crossed, watching this interaction with an expression that revealed nothing. "Because," Trevor said carefully, "sometimes people make mistakes, big ones, and they spend a long time trying to figure out how to make things right. This is me trying." Noah considered this. Then, with the brutal honesty only children possess, he said, "My teacher says saying sorry doesn't fix things. You have to show it." "You're right," Trevor agreed. "So I'm going to show you. Okay?" Lily grabbed Trevor's hand with the fearlessness of a child who hadn't learned to be afraid yet. "Do you like rockets?" "We love rockets." Trevor's breath caught as he looked down at her small hand, in his so tiny, so trusting, so completely unaware that she was holding her father's hand for the first time. "I love rockets," he managed. And just like that, with a question about rockets and a 6-year-old's unconditional acceptance, Trevor's heart shattered and began to heal all at once. Over the next 3 weeks, Trevor became a fixture in their lives. He paid for Lily's surgery, the best cardiac surgeon in Colorado, a private room, every accommodation Lauren would allow. He showed up at the hospital during pre-op appointments, sitting quietly in waiting rooms, never pushing, never demanding more than Lauren offered. He brought books for Noah, astronomy guides, picture books about space exploration. Noah remained suspicious, but Trevor noticed the way the boy clutched those books at night, reading them by flashlight under his covers. He read to Lily during her hospital stays for testing. Stories about brave princesses and clever girls who saved kingdoms. She'd curl against his side, her head on his shoulder, and Trevor would have to pause mid-sentence because his voice kept breaking. Lauren watched from doorways and corners, arms crossed, expression unreadable. But Trevor caught the moments her face softened, the times she'd smile despite herself when Lily laughed at something he said, the way her eyes would linger on him with Noah, watching this man she'd once loved interact with the son he was just learning to know. The walls were cracking. Slowly, painfully, but cracking. Carlos cornered Lauren in the hospital cafeteria one afternoon, while Trevor was upstairs reading to the twins. "We need to talk," Carlos said, his voice low. Lauren stirred her terrible coffee, not meeting his eyes. "About what?" "About him." Carlos jerked his head toward the ceiling, toward the room where Trevor sat with children he'd abandoned. "I see the way you look at him." "I don't." "Yes, you do." Carlos's voice was gentle but firm. "You look at him the way you used to talk about him. Back when you first came to Denver, pregnant and heartbroken. You're falling for him again." "I'm not," Lauren said, but even she could hear the lie. "Lauren," Carlos reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "I've watched you survive 6 years of hell. I've seen you fight for those kids with everything you have, and I've never said a word about your choices. But I'm saying it now, be careful. He left once. Men like that don't change." Lauren pulled her hand back, something defensive rising in her chest. "Maybe, but maybe people deserve second chances." The words surprised her, even as she said them. Carlos studied her face, then sighed. Maybe, but if he hurts you again, if he hurts those kids, he'll answer to me. He won't, Lauren said with a conviction she didn't entirely feel, but she wanted to believe it. God, she wanted to believe it. Lily's surgery was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. It went well, better than expected, the surgeon said. Clean repair, no complications. But recovery was hard. Lily was in pain, disoriented from anesthesia, crying for her mother in a way that broke Lauren's heart. Lauren stayed by her bedside, holding Lily's small hand, whispering promises that everything would be okay. Trevor stayed too. Not in the room. Lauren had made it clear that space belonged to her and her daughter, but in the waiting room, pacing, checking his phone obsessively for updates, looking like a man being slowly torn apart. By 3 a.m., when Lily finally fell into an exhausted sleep, Lauren stepped out into the hallway and found Trevor exactly where she'd left him 6 hours earlier. He looked terrible. Rumpled suit, dark circles under his eyes, hair standing in every direction from running his hands through it. "She's sleeping," Lauren said quietly. Trevor's shoulders sagged with relief. Thank God. They ended up in the hospital cafeteria, the only place open at this hour. Bad coffee and stale vending machine sandwiches, fluorescent lights that made everything look washed out and surreal. Lauren wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, absorbing the warmth. Trevor sat across from her, and for a moment, neither spoke. Then Trevor broke the silence. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness," he said, his voice raw. "I know I destroyed what we had, but I need you to know I never stopped loving you." Lauren's hands tightened around her cup. "Trevor, I need to say this." His eyes met hers, and in them she saw 6 years of regret. "Every success I had felt hollow because you weren't there to share it. Every night I went to bed alone, I thought about what I'd thrown away. I convinced myself you'd moved on, that you were happy, that I'd made the right choice, but I was lying to myself. Because the truth is, losing you was the biggest mistake of my life." Tears slipped down Lauren's cheeks before she could stop them. "That's the problem, Trevor," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I never stopped either." The admission hung between them, fragile, terrifying, true. "I wanted to hate you," Lauren continued, tears flowing freely now. "I tried so hard to hate you, but every time Lily laughed, I heard your laugh. Every time Noah concentrated on something, I saw your face. They're half you, and I couldn't hate you without hating part of them." Trevor reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers, asking permission. Lauren took it. Their fingers intertwined, and it felt like coming home and falling apart all at once. "I'm sorry," Trevor whispered, "for all of it, for every day I wasn't there, for every moment I should have been holding you instead of building an empire that meant nothing without you." "I know," Lauren said softly, "and that's what scares me most, because I believe you, and I'm terrified of what happens if I let you back in and you leave again. I won't. You don't know that." Lauren's voice was gentle but firm. "None of us know that. Life gets hard, scandals happen, pressure builds, and I need to know when it does. Will you run again, or will you stay?" Trevor squeezed her hand, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "I'll stay. I swear to God, Lauren, I'll stay." She wanted to believe him. Sitting in that cafeteria at 3 a.m., exhausted and emotionally raw, watching this man she'd once loved, still loved, make promises she desperately wanted to be true. Lauren felt hope bloom in her chest. Fragile, dangerous, but real. Maybe they could do this. Maybe they could find their way back to each other. Maybe love really was worth the risk. But just as that hope began to take root, just as Lauren allowed herself to imagine a future where Trevor stayed, where they became a family, where 6 years of pain could transform into something beautiful, Trevor's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and his entire body went rigid. "I have to take this," he said, his voice suddenly tight. He stepped away, phone pressed to his ear, his back to Lauren. She couldn't hear the conversation, but she watched his posture shift, the way his shoulders tensed, the way he ran his hand through his hair in that gesture she recognized as stress. When he returned, his face was pale. "What's wrong?" Lauren asked. Trevor's jaw worked. Nothing, just work. But Lauren had spent 6 years learning to read people, to spot the lies people told when they thought you wouldn't notice. And Trevor was lying. Before she could press, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Ask him about Victoria Preston. Ask him why she's flying to Denver. Ask him what he's not telling you. Lauren's blood went cold. She looked up at Trevor, who was staring at his phone with an expression that looked like dread. "Trevor," Lauren said slowly, "who's Victoria Preston?" The color drained from his face, and Lauren knew with a certainty that made her stomach drop that just as she'd started to believe in second chances, a ghost from Trevor's past had arrived to destroy everything once more. Victoria Preston arrived in Denver the next morning like a storm cloud, expensive heels clicking against hospital tile, designer suit that cost more than most people's monthly salary, smile sharp enough to cut glass. Trevor saw her coming through the hospital lobby windows and felt his stomach drop. He met her outside, away from Lauren's room, away from the twins, away from the fragile hope he'd been building for 3 weeks. "Victoria." His voice was flat. "What are you doing here?" Victoria pulled off her sunglasses, her eyes cold and calculating. "Saving you from yourself." Again. "I don't need saving." "Really?" Victoria's laugh was humorless. "Because from where I'm standing, you're about to destroy everything we've built. The board is asking questions, Trevor, about where you've been disappearing to, about the hospital bills showing up under your name, about the woman and children you're suddenly so interested in." Trevor's jaw tightened. "That's none of their business. It's all their business." Victoria stepped closer, her voice dropping to something dangerous. "You're the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. Your personal life affects stock prices, shareholder confidence, our reputation, and right now you're risking it all for what? A woman you abandoned 6 years ago and 2 kids who don't even know you're their father." "Watch it," Trevor warned. But Victoria wasn't finished. "I came here to offer you a deal. Merge our companies. Marry me. Create the kind of power couple that makes headlines for the right reasons. Walk away from this mess before it destroys you." Trevor stared at her in disbelief. "You think I'd marry you for a business deal? People have married for less." Victoria's smile was cold. "And unlike your little charity case upstairs, I won't cost you your empire. I'll help you build it." "Get out!" Trevor's voice was low, dangerous. "Choose, Trevor." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "Your empire or your little family fantasy, because you can't have both. The moment this gets out, and it will get out, the media will tear you apart. Billionaire CEO abandons pregnant girlfriend, returns 6 years later. How do you think that plays with investors?" Trevor's hands clenched into fists. "I don't care. You will." Victoria pulled out her phone, showing him a draft press release. "This goes out tomorrow, unless you agree to my terms. I'll make sure every news outlet in the country knows about your secret family, about how you left her broke and pregnant, about how you're trying to buy your way back into their lives now. Your reputation will be destroyed, your company will tank, and for what? A woman who probably hates you anyway?" Trevor looked at the press release, his heart pounding. Then he looked back at the hospital, where Lauren sat with their daughter, where his children existed, where the only real thing in his life was happening, and he made his choice. "Do it," Trevor said quietly. Victoria blinked. "What?" "Release the story. Tell them everything. I don't care anymore." Trevor's voice was steady now, certain. "Because you're right about one thing, I can't have both, so I'm choosing them." "You're insane," Victoria hissed. "You'll lose everything." "I already lost everything once." Trevor met her eyes. "When I walked away from them, I'm not making that mistake again." Victoria's face hardened. "Fine, but don't come crying to me when your empire burns." She turned on her heel and left, her heels clicking against tile like a countdown to disaster. Trevor stood in that hallway, his heart racing, and realized he'd just set fire to everything he'd spent 6 years building. And he'd never felt more certain of anything in his life. Trevor called a press conference for the next morning. His PR team tried to talk him out of it. His lawyers threatened to quit. His board demanded explanations. But Trevor was done running, done hiding, done choosing fear over love. He stood behind a podium in a Denver hotel conference room, facing a crowd of reporters whose cameras flashed like lightning, and took a breath. "I'm here to tell you the truth about my life," Trevor began, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. 6 years ago, I was in love with an incredible woman, and when she told me she was pregnant, I panicked. I was dealing with my father's crimes, with a company on the verge of collapse, with pressure I couldn't handle. So I left. I walked away. I gave her a check and convinced myself it was the noble choice. The reporters leaned forward, cameras flashing faster. "But it wasn't noble," Trevor continued, his voice cracking. "It was cowardice. I have 2 children, twins, a boy and a girl, 6 years old, and I've missed every moment of their lives because I was too afraid to stay, too afraid to be the father they deserved, too afraid to be the man the woman I loved needed me to be." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "I've built an empire," Trevor said, his eyes burning. "I've made billions. I've been on magazine covers and won awards and convinced myself that success could fill the void I created, but it couldn't, because I lost the only kingdom that mattered, my family." His voice broke on the last word. "If standing here costs me everything, my reputation, my company, my career, so be it, because they're worth more than all of this. They're worth more than anything I could ever build." Trevor gripped the podium, tears streaming down his face now, not caring who saw. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I'm asking for a chance to be the father I should have been 6 years ago, a chance to prove that some men can change, that some mistakes, no matter how terrible, can be redeemed." The room was silent. Then Trevor stepped away from the podium, ignoring the shouted questions, and walked out. Lauren sat in Lily's hospital room, her phone balanced on the bedside table, streaming the press conference. She'd received a text from Trevor that morning. "Turn on Channel 7 at 10 a.m. Trust me." Now, watching him stand in front of the world and admit everything, the abandonment, the regret, the love Lauren felt, her carefully constructed walls shatter completely. "Mommy, why is that man crying?" Noah asked, peering at the screen. Lauren's own tears fell freely now. "Because sometimes, baby, love is scary, but it's the only thing worth fighting for." Lily sat up in her hospital bed, still pale from surgery but getting stronger every day. "Is he the friend who helped us?" "Yes," Lauren whispered. "He looks really sad," Lily said softly. "Should we help him?" Lauren looked at her daughter, this brave, beautiful girl who'd just survived heart surgery, who had every reason to be afraid of the world, but chose kindness anyway, and made her decision. "Yes," Lauren said, grabbing her keys. "We should." Lauren burst into the press conference 20 minutes later, twins in hand, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might explode. Trevor stood near the exit, surrounded by reporters shouting questions, looking exhausted and defeated and like he'd just lost everything that mattered. Then he saw her. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and time stopped. Before Trevor could move, before Lauren could second-guess herself, Lily broke free from her mother's hand and ran. "Mr. Trevor," she shouted, her small voice cutting through the chaos. "Don't cry. Superheroes don't cry." She crashed into him, her small arms wrapping around his legs, and Trevor dropped to his knees. "Even superheroes cry sometimes, sweetheart," he said, his voice breaking as he pulled her into his arms. Noah followed more slowly, cautiously, but when he reached Trevor, he wrapped his arms around his neck. And Trevor held them both, his children, his babies. The 6 years he'd lost condensed into this one perfect moment, and sobbed. The cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions, but Trevor didn't hear any of it. All he heard was Lily whispering, "It's okay. We're here now." Lauren approached slowly, her own tears falling, and Trevor looked up at her with an expression that held everything he couldn't say. She crouched down beside them, and Trevor reached for her hand. "You walked away once," Lauren whispered, her voice fierce. "Don't you ever do it again." "Never," Trevor promised, his hand tightening around hers. "I promise, always and forever." Lauren had heard those words before, 6 years ago in a penthouse overlooking the city. But this time, surrounded by their children and the wreckage of Trevor's carefully constructed empire, she believed them. Because this time, he'd proven it. He'd chosen them over everything, and that changed everything. 1 year later, the twins' 7th birthday party was nothing like the diner. Lauren's backyard, their backyard now, in a house Trevor had insisted on buying but put in her name, was filled with actual decorations. Real balloons that still had helium. A cake from an actual bakery with both their names spelled correctly. 20 kids from their school ran around playing games. Carlos stood by the grill, flipping burgers, his daughter Rosa helping Noah set up his new telescope. Trevor watched from the porch, a small velvet box burning a hole in his pocket. He'd carried it for 3 months, waiting for the right moment. But there was never going to be a perfect moment. Not with them. Their love story wasn't perfect. It was messy and complicated and built on the ruins of everything he'd destroyed. But it was real, and that was enough. Lauren appeared beside him, 2 paper plates in hand. "You're thinking too loud." Trevor smiled. "Am I?" Lauren handed him a plate of cake. "What's going on in that head of yours?" Trevor's hand moved to his pocket, fingers brushing the box. Lauren noticed. Of course she noticed. She always noticed. Her eyes widened slightly, then softened, then filled with tears. "Trevor, not yet," he said quietly. "When the kids are asleep, when it's just us, when I can do this right." Lauren's hand covered his, both of them touching the box in his pocket. "Okay," she whispered. "But for the record, my answer is yes." Trevor's breath caught. "You don't even know the question." "Yes, I do." Lauren smiled through her tears. "And it's still yes." They stood there on the porch, watching their children play, watching the life they'd rebuilt from ashes, and Trevor felt something he hadn't felt in 6 years. Complete. "I love you," he whispered. "I know," Lauren said. "I love you too. Even when I hated you, I loved you. That doesn't make sense. Love never does." And as the sun set over Denver, as their children laughed and played and existed in a world where they were loved and safe and whole, Trevor understood something fundamental. Some love stories don't end perfectly. They don't follow the script or hit the right beats or resolve every conflict with a neat bow. Some love stories are messy. They involve mistakes and regret and years of pain. They require forgiveness that's hard-won and trust that's rebuilt brick by brick. But they end honestly. And sometimes, that's even better than perfect. Because perfect is a fantasy. But this, standing on a porch with the woman he loved and the children he'd almost lost, this was real. And real, Trevor had learned, was worth everything. "My beautiful family, we've reached the end. But I need to know, do you believe Daniel and Melissa's love can survive? Tell me in the comments what you think happens next. And if this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to believe in second chances. Subscribe for more stories that will make you feel everything. Until then, remember, love isn't perfect, but it's always worth the fight.